Carl's Cafe. Written by Diane Bates. Illustrated by Terry Denton. Chapter 1. The Playhouse. From a very young age, my twin brother Carl loved to cook. When he was 6 years old, he made his first meal. It was breakfast in bed for Mom and Dad. He made them soggy cornflakes and burnt toast. But it certainly impressed our parents, and that made Carl even keener to be a cook. When we were 9 years old, Dad built us a playhouse in the backyard. The playhouse was like a proper house, only smaller. It had a blue front door, a doorbell that chimed in windows with flower boxes and wooden shutters. Inside we had cupboards, shelves, a table, and some chairs. For the first week after it was finished, Carl and I and all our friends played mothers and fathers. Then we pretended the playhouse was a hospital and played doctors and nurses. I loved this game. But the others got bored with getting pretend needles and being bandaged. "We've played hospital long enough, Lizzie," Carl said to me. "Let's turn our playhouse into a restaurant and I can be the chef and make lunch," suggested Carl. "Great," yelled Rodney Fogelberg and Jeffrey Dangerfield, who were playing with us. Kellyanne Kilger didn't say anything. She still had the thermometer in her mouth. I sulked. "I'm not playing restaurants. I'm going to look in Dad's medical dictionary instead," I said. I liked the dictionary. It had pictures of blue veins, pink and red guts, babies before they were born, and men and women's bodies. "Lizzie, you can be the restaurant's first aid lady," Carl said. "But what does the first aid lady do?" I asked Carl. "She looks after people who get sick," said Carl. Kellyanne pulled the thermometer out of her mouth. "I don't want to play restaurants," she said. "I'm still in hospital. Or people might fall out of their chairs and get fish bones stuck in their throats," Carl continued. Throat operations and broken bones sounded like fun. I might play. "But what's for lunch?" I demanded. "Whatever you want," Carl promised. Jeffrey wanted hot dogs. "Pizza, pie with sauce and French fries," yelled greedy Rodney Fogelberg. "Popcorn, please," said Kellyanne. I said I wanted spaghetti bolognese. "I can't make all those things," Carl groaned. "I told you spaghetti, or I won't play," I insisted. The others said that spaghetti was okay with them. "But I'll have to ask Janie about it first," Carl said. Chapter 2. The Chef. Janie, our babysitter, was reading in the backyard where she could keep an eye on what we were doing. "Janie," Carl yelled. "It's time for lunch. We're hungry." Janie was not pleased with the idea of our friends staying for lunch. "Your mother doesn't pay me to make lunch for all the kids in the neighborhood," she said. "No, Janie, Ely make it," Carl said. Janie didn't mind at all then. "But the rest of you must ask your moms first," she said. "And you've got to clean up after yourselves." "We will," Janie promised Carl. "Right, Lizzie?" I nodded at Carl, but felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. Carl was not the tittiest cook in the kitchen. While the others went home to ask their mothers, Carl started cooking in the kitchen. Janie put away the breakfast dishes and I repacked my doctor's kit in case of an emergency operation during lunch. Then I drew a big sign to put inside the playhouse, Carl's Cafe. It was a beautiful sign written in pink and red felt-tip pen with scrolls, squiggly lines and stars all over it. When Rodney, Kellyanne and Jeffrey came back, I tried to get them to help me color in the letters. But Kellyanne colored her toenails with the felt-tip pen instead. The boys drew designs and wrote things on the walls. Then they dotted each other's faces and said they had measles. After that we were bored. We went to the kitchen to complain to Carl and Janie, but Carl shooed us all outdoors. "It won't take much longer," he said. "Hey Carl, something's burning," Jeffrey joked. "Oh no!" Carl rushed to the stove. Jeffrey went whooping down the backyard. Our little black and white dog, Tigger, tore after him, leaping into the air and yapping with delight. Tigger loved playing tag. Jeffrey grabbed a towel from the ground and swirled it around. Head down, Tigger charged at it. Rodney and I pulled a couple of pillow slips off the clothesline. We waved them around, pretending Tigger was a raging bull. "Hey, watch out!" We almost knocked Carl over as he came out of the house. He was carefully carrying out a tray laden with bowls of food. Chapter 3. The Secret Recipe. We threw down our bullfighter's gear and charged into the playhouse. 2, 4, 6, 8, start, don't wait. Rodney and Jeffrey chorused as Carl ladled out the food. "You've got to say your prayers first," Kellyanne said. Rodney was just about to shovel a forkful of food into his mouth. "It's called grace and it's like prayers. If we don't say it before we eat, then we'll get dead and we won't go to heaven," Kellyanne insisted. "All right then," we chorused, just to keep her quiet. Kellyanne recited a very long story about starving children. "Hurry up, Kellyanne, or I'll starve to death," Rodney interrupted. "Amen." Rondi was the first to gobble down a mouthful. "It's great," he spluttered. "You shouldn't talk with your mouth full, Rodney Fogelberg," said Kellen. Carl was watching us all very closely. "What's it like?" he asked. The spaghetti didn't look like regular spaghetti. Carl had cooked it so it was all mangled together and looked like lumpy mashed potato. "It tastes funny," Jeffrey said. "What do you mean?" "Well, sort of. I don't know. It's not like my mom makes it," mumbled Jeffrey. Carl looked upset, so I said, "It's better than your mom makes, Jeffrey Dangerfield." "Because Carl has a secret recipe, don't you, Carl?" Carl nodded dumbly. "I think it tastes rather funny, too," Kellyanne said. "You're just a fussy pants," I snapped. "Rodney likes it." Rodney had already finished his first plateful and was looking for seconds. "He's just a greedy guts," Kellyanne said. "He'll eat anything." "So, why don't you try it, Lizzie?" Jeffrey demanded. Everyone watched as I took a mouthful of the spaghetti. Carl had made spaghetti bolognese lots of times with Mom's help and it had always turned out great. However, one mouthful today told me something was wrong. It tasted peculiar. Very peculiar. "It's awful, isn't it?" said Jeffrey. "It's lovely," I lied. I knew how important it was to Carl that everyone liked his cooking. Besides, twins always stick up for each other. Carl was mad about all the criticism. "See? It's not awful," he yelled at Jeffrey. "Lizzie likes it." "What's in it, then?" asked Jeffrey. Carl would not answer. "And how are we supposed to eat it?" Jeffrey poked at the pasta with his finger. "It's all blobby, not like real spaghetti." Jeffrey poked again at the lump on his plate and laughed. "I'm going to make a big volcano out of mine." Rodney had eaten enough. He spooned up a fat glob of spaghetti onto his plate. "I'm making a giant man with a fat belly," Rodney announced. "I'm making gizzards," I said. Even Kellyanne and Carl saw how funny it was to be making things out of pasta, so they joined in, too. We had a contest to see who could make the weirdest object. I made gizzards, lungs, a heart, ears, and a hand. The hand had lots of red sauce at the wrist that looked like blood. Chapter 4. The Pasta Mess. Roger had lots of fun during our pasta contest. He kept jumping up as we fed him handful of pasta and sticky sauce. Then Jeffrey grabbed Kellyanne and shoved a handful of pasta down the back of her dress. Kellyanne went wailing down the street, crying. The rest of us collapsed in a messy, laughing pile on the playhouse floor. Tigger scrambled over us trying to lick sauce off our faces. Janie came pelting down the backyard to the playhouse. "What's all the noise?" "What did you do to Kellyanne?" she yelled. Janie peered at us through the playhouse window. "You dreadful, dreadful children," she screamed when she saw the mess. This made our pasta contest only seem funnier, and we burst out laughing even louder. But Janie was really mad, especially as Mom would soon be home from work. "Cart the kitchen's on absolute mess as well. You and Lizzie can clean it up, and Letty and Rodney can clean up the playhouse." "Right now," yelled Janie. Carl and I scrambled to it, knowing we'd be in big, big trouble if Mom found her kitchen untidy and dirty. But Jeffrey and Rodney ran off, leaving us with a messy playhouse that took ages to clean up afterward. Carl might think he's a great cook, but he's a real slob in the kitchen. Pots and pans covered every spot of bench space. The sink was crowded with bowls, strainers, wooden spoons, trays, cutlery, everything you could think of. It all had to be washed up, dried, and put away before Mom came home from work. I swept and mopped the floor while Carl washed the dishes. Janie wiped down the benches. "What did you need strawberry topping for?" Janie asked Carl. I caught sight of Carl's face. It was a bright, embarrassed red. "We didn't have any bolognese sauce left," Carl stammered. "So you used strawberry topping instead?" I asked. On the kitchen bench were pots of cinnamon, pepper, and mustard. "Did you use these too?" I asked. Carl nodded. He was almost crying. "I wanted the spaghetti to taste extra special," Carl said. "It did taste different," I promised him. I didn't tell him it tasted awful, as that would have upset him. Mom arrived home just as we finished cleaning up the kitchen. "And what have you children been up to today?" she said, putting down her bag. "Nothing much," I said. "Just playing in the playhouse."